Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Fat Minute. I'm your host, Don John, joined tonight by my co-host, the man of a thousand voices, BVJ.
Hello.
How you doing, Blake?
Good.
Well, that's good. We're taking a break from Frasier reviews this week. We're going back to our regular standard format tonight, just riffing, talking about some stuff we've been up to. What have you been up to, Blake? You watch anything good lately? Read anything?
Uh no, I'm either at work, I'm with my daughter, and then when my daughter goes to bed, I go to bed like a half hour later.
Well, how's that working out for you?
I'm still always tired.
You and me both, man. Let me tell you something. It's Monday today. It's Monday the 27th, just for context. And today, I don't know about you, but today was the most Monday of Mondays that I have experienced in a long fucking time.
I cannot agree with that because I was at least off today, yeah. For me it was like Sunday.
Oh, well, today it was for me. It was Monday Part Five. Jason Lives.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've been talking to my family about this, like my wife, my aunts, my mom, like everyone is just collectively like tired.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's something in the water supply in the air, but just
Well, it's
everybody's always tired.
well. I think it's also at least partly because we can't go more than a day without hearing about how something's going to shit in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
Like it'd be nice to, just have a solid like week where nothing bad or concerning happens.
Um, yes.
But we're gonna try to take a moment. We're gonna try to dissociate from all that bad stuff and try to have a little fun here tonight. So Blake, you were talking the other day, talking to me about how you were looking into like some magazine or whatever. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I actually subscribed to it today.
Oh, really?
Um, yes, yes. So I'm gonna ruin the mysticism of our lore and canon and one of our oldest inside jokes. I'm gonna shock people, but I'm sure this should have been obvious since I'm able to use social media and whatnot. I am indeed able to read.
I mean, you
Yep,
could, you could. I mean, you could have just said you subscribed to Playboy because then you're only getting it for the pictures.
um I know that there's a really good joke somewhere in there, but it's not coming to me right now. So I'm sorry.
It's
Um
okay.
anyway, anyway. But yeah, I hate to tear down the curtain on the show. And just our
Kayfabe is
interactions with
dead.
each other. Huh?
Kayfabe is dead.
Yeah. I have no idea what you just said, but okay.
It's
Um
a wrestling term. I'll explain it to you later.
okay. But anyway, yes, I am indeed able to read, and I do like reading. I obviously should read. I've always felt like I should read more books than I do, but I've always considered myself well read because I still, you know, consume information and knowledge and wisdom either through articles or essays or studies and whatnot. I just don't read as many novels as I should. And I remember I had a coworker at the theaters who like fucking hated it when I said that, when I would be like, well, I still read other stuff, so I still like to consider myself well read. He goes, well, I read the back of a shampoo bottle sometimes, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what you're trying to say. Are you trying to say that what I'm saying is invalid? He goes, it's just different, okay? It's just not the same. It's just different, and I'm like, oh, because you said so. I don't know what you're basing this off of. Um, and and I guess I'm just getting into a rant here, but when you tell me that you've read like all the Hunger Games, all the Divergent, and like all those like YA dystopian teen romance sagas and series, that's good. It's better than nothing, but really that just tells me that you just like the imagination of other people, which again is fine, but that's that still doesn't necessarily make you more studious or informed than me. I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of a cop out in itself too. It's just fantasy. But I don't know, not to get off the rails there, but there's this magazine that I subscribe to because again, I want to I want to read more than I've currently been doing outside of my phone. I just like to read in portions. I just kind of have trouble, sticking with something, staying with something. I guess I kind of do, in a small sense, kind of have like a little bit of a attention deficit disorder, which there is a stigma with that, where people think that if you have that, it means you must not be intelligent, which that's not the case at all. That's like completely unrelated to how intelligent you are. Um, so yeah, it's called Whalebone, and it's kind of like in a way, it's kind of like a more culture-driven uh, National Geographic type print, and their aesthetic is kind of minimalist yet poppy and modern. And I haven't gotten my first few issues yet, but I'll be sure to update when I do. But I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to just taking a break from the doom scrolling
Mm-hmm.
and just reading something off the page. Nothing political, uh nothing sad or scary. Just I don't know, just a good, nice, light read.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, but thank you for asking me about that. I wouldn't have bothered bringing it up since I didn't get my first few issues in the mail, but I'll be sure to work that in the future.
Well, hopefully this will be the first step towards you finally reading that book I loaned you 2 years ago.
Dad is fat.
Dad is Fat by Jim Gaffigan. And then after that, maybe you'll be enticed to read his second novel, Food, a love story. Funny enough, his book about his love of food is significantly thicker than his book about being a father.
I I will always love Jim Gaffigan for clapping back at people who think they're better than McDonald's, because I felt like I was attacked in that.
Yeah.
Because I do indeed think I am better than McDonald's, and he just said, "Well, McDonald's wouldn't want you anyway because you're kind of a dick."
I love the one bit he says where he's just like, let's be real here. Your mother has never cooked anything nearly as good as a McDonald's fry. Which, for my mother, that is absolutely accurate. It's like I said before, like I said to you the other day, like, you ever have foods as a kid that like you thought were fucking nasty, but then you grow up and you find out your mom just couldn't cook for shit?
Um,
Because that's happened to
can't
me a
relate.
lot.
My mom was actually pretty decent. My mom made really good chili.
Oh,
Oh, and her chili, she made it thick.
oh man, I gotta call up your mom and see if she can make me some chili.
No, I mean, like, she did not make that shit soupy because I would have hated it soupy. No, you could have stuck a spoon in it and it would have stuck straight up.
Oh man, I gotta call your mom after we get off the air here.
Well, and it was nice because she made such a big pot. She was able to freeze some of it, and it lasted us all winter one year.
Jesus Christ.
I'm not lying. She made it thick.
God damn.
You would have thought I was waiting for Balto to bring me my medicine.
Oh man, man, that's a reference. That's a deep cut.
And then, my dad still ate all my fries.
I don't think we've ever told that story on here before.
So,
Yeah, just go into it. This
when
I
I
gotta say, this is probably like this is if not my favorite, one of my favorite Phil stories.
so when I was a little kid, my dad was like having like a fat ass big brother. He just thought it was funny to like be sticking his paws in my fries and eat my fries, and I'd be like, no, stop that. And he just thought it was hilarious. He's a huge sweet tooth, and yeah, I mean, and he doesn't have the appetite he used to have, because now I'm like, we go out to lunch and I'm like, Dad, I can't finish my fries. Here, you can have them. Oh no, no, thank you. And I'm like, oh, see, now that I'm offering, you're not interested. But he would he he would just eat my fries. And I remember one time we sent him to get Burger King and bring it home. And he came home, and there was maybe only a few fries left in my carton. And I did not get a large fry to begin with. And I was like so upset because I was so hungry. And my mom was like, listen up. Listen up, prick. You get your fucking ass back in that car and go get him another fry. And yeah, and he made good on that. And I just remember, like, I told this story to Donnie, and Donnie loves this story, everybody. And recently, I guess Donnie went to Burger King himself and got a meal, and he emptied out the whole carton of fries. He took a picture of it, sent it to me, and said, "Here you go, son." I just remember, like, in so it evolved into other stuff. So when I got older, he would like eat all the desserts in the house. And like if I was like, oh, you know what, I'm not in the mood for like a mini pie or a cookie today, but I'll maybe have some tomorrow. They would all be gone by the next day. So finally, like I would get Pepperidge Farm cookies because my pop got me into those, and my wife makes fun of me because she's like, "Why do you get old man cookies?" And I like the Chessmen pure butter, and I like would hide them, or I would like tuck them away, or I would put them in the back of the cabinet or whatever. And I remember one day my dad just walks up to me, and I'm like, keep in mind, I'm in my mid-20s. He says this to me. He just walks up and goes, you don't have to hide your cookies from me. And I just go, well, apparently I do because you still found them.
A little bit of role reversal in that conversation.
Yep. Yep. So,
So, like, remind me, when that Burger King story, was he getting food for all of you or just you?
uh,
Because if he was getting food for the whole family, or like at the very least you and like one other person, like the fact that he stole from your fries just makes him even shittier if you weren't the only one that he got food for.
I can't remember, but in my defense, I was I was that age, like it's a Friday night, I'm watching like Teen Nick or whatever. Only my meal was the one that mattered. Like I wasn't
Yeah,
aware of other
yeah,
people's meals anyway. So
yeah.
my I don't know. I guess I kind of did grow up in an untraditional household in the sense of like family dinners because like we very much just did our own thing.
Hmm.
Like we did not really do the whole like sitting around the table and talk about our days and everything. Like dinner time was just very much like a free for all. Like, oh well, my mom was like, oh, I'll just make myself some soup, or my dad would be like, oh, I'll just make myself a TV dinner, and when I'm coming home from errands, I'll just pick Blake up something. So yeah, that was just kind of our dynamic.
All right.
So yeah, where were we? What were we even talking about before all that? Like I brought up my fries and
I don't remember.
um, yeah, I totally forget what we were talking about. So that means it was good.
Well, I'll go ahead and move into like just something I've been doing lately. And I was looking for like a new video game to play, and I had found a game that I had downloaded on my PS3 like 10 years ago almost. And I had started it but never finished it. So it's like, oh well, fuck, there's my new game right there. Um, do you remember back in the PS1 days, Gex,
I
the
do
gecko?
I do, yes, I do. I at least remember like the cover
Yeah,
or like a couple screenshots of it. I don't remember like legitimate gameplay.
yeah. Like it was one of those game. Yeah, like I was like I remember seeing like the games in stores like all the time and seeing like advertisements for it, but I never remember seeing actual gameplay. Well, I take that back because I actually had a demo disc back in the day that had like a level from this specific game on it. Do you remember the PS1 demo discs?
Yes, I do. I was literally just thinking of that because
Like, weren't those things amazing? Like,
it
those things are
yeah.
very much an example of like kids today just don't know. Like, because in some ways, getting a demo disc from like a magazine or something was like more fun than getting an actual full-fledged game because it's like, oh damn, look at all these games that are like not out yet, but they're like about to come out, and I can play a little bit of like all of them. Like
Yeah, yeah.
was
I
there was something really magical about them.
Yes, I specifically remember, I forget what year it was, but I remember my dad had a coworker who like he either had a coworker who subscribed to like PlayStation magazine, or this would have been an even cooler story. My dad worked at the post office, and I think like there was like this like he just came across an issue that was like it the address label must have fallen off of it, or it was returned to sender, or he just found a lone issue of PlayStation magazine that was like in limbo. It didn't have a phone, it didn't have a home, there was no way to give it to wherever it was originally supposed to go. It was
Hmm.
basically like there's nothing to do with it except pitch it or trash it. And
Right.
my dad was like, oh well, I have a son, like, he's into video games. He brought it home to me, and it came with one of those discs. And I'm like, oh shit, this is the best day ever. Like, I totally forgive this prick for my fries. I want to reel it back in on the prick talk. I'm sorry. I'm having a little too much fun, but I like to think that if he was listening to this, he'd be laughing too. Um, so anyway, yeah, but no. Long story short, my demo disc came with like um, it was like an Army Man game. It was like they made like a series of
Yeah,
PlayStation games
I
where
remember
you played
those.
as like the Army Men. It was kind of like Toy Story, but like more messed up, where like you can get like melted and burned up and shit.
Yeah.
And I think one of the demos was also for the most recent Twisted Metal.
Nice.
And this just proves how much of a goody two shoes kid I was. My dad was like, "Oh, that's rated M, so you better not click on that." And like, even if I was playing it late at night and my parents were both asleep, I'd be like, "Well, mom and dad said I'm not allowed to play this, so I guess I can't click on it." So, and we'll get to another story, everybody, where I was dishonest when it came to a video game, but I I I, I want to bounce it back to you, Donnie. I didn't mean to hijack that.
All right, well, yeah, like I said, found on my PS3. I had downloaded it off the PlayStation Store like 10 years ago. Gex 2 on the PS1. Why I didn't download Gex 1, I don't know because I've never played any of the games. There's three of them, but I downloaded Gex 2, so I was like, oh well, fuck it, let's play this thing that's been sitting on my PS3 for a decade. Um, and playing it, I mean, the game itself is okay. It made me appreciate how far video games have come in a lot of things. Stuff that we kind of take for granted, like the big one being video games having good cameras, because the camera in Gex 2 fucking ruins the game most of the time. Um, but the game has some decent humor. It's got some humor that honestly slaps. Like there's because the plot of the game is like you're in what's known as like the media dimension, which is the dimension that like television exists in,
Hmm.
and you're trying to like save it from this cyborg wizard or whatever. It's weird. It's got a very 90s flair to it, but the levels are all based on like the levels all have different genres, and like there's one set of levels that's based on like very much an homage to like Looney Tunes kind of cartoons. And you
Yeah.
jump in, and as soon as the level starts, just Gex just looks at the camera and goes, "They see the world like Keith Richards does." There's another one that's based in like this super high tech, like futuristic tower, and he's just like, "Oh man, all this technology just so fat guys can listen to Rush Limbaugh."
Good. I like that.
Yeah, there's some humor that really slaps in the game. It almost has like a Simpsons vibe to it. Game itself is fine, but like the main reason I bring this game up, just because it really got me thinking about like how during that era, like the PS1 era, and then also in the PS2 era, there was like a lot of video game mascots, and how most of them have really become forgotten by this point. And it's just so weird to me because most of them had really good games. Like, so
Mhm.
I mean, for the PS1, you had Crash Bandicoot, you had Spyro the Dragon, you had Gex, he was pretty popular. You had Parappa the Rapper, you had Croc, and I feel like there's some more that I forgot about. And then the PS2, you had Sly Cooper, you had Jack and Daxter. I mean, Ratchet and Clank are still kind of a thing, but yeah, it's just kind of weird to me how there was a ton of these video game mascots who, really had some solid ratings as far as their video games go, and over time they just kind of got forgotten about.
Yeah, I feel like now, like, I mean, only Mario has survived and stayed ongoing. And then, I mean, like, there was Rayman, but I feel like
Yeah,
Rayman,
Rayman.
like, now, like, just those bunny rabbit things, like,
Yeah, those.
outlived him.
Yeah, basically Rayman's equivalent to the Minions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I feel like those lived on after him. And
Yeah,
what, and you said Crash Bandicoot. There was also, like,
yeah. Crash has kind of made a comeback though.
I don't know if you remember, like, I know you did not, you never personally had an N64, correct?
No.
Okay. Do you still remember, though, like, the one game Conker's Bad Fur Day or whatever?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So there was, like, the very, like, ornery teddy bear or whatever. But yeah, just add him to the list. Um, I mean, fuck it. I'm just gonna get to the point. Can I tell the Croc story now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, long story short, back in the day, like, this is like 99 going into 2000, there was like an ongoing agreement in my house where if I aced my weekly spelling test, I got to rent a movie or a video game for the weekend. And, as we all know, the spelling tests, or well, I guess as most people know, spelling tests would be given on Fridays. We would get the words on Monday. We had all week to study and memorize the words. And then Friday, we would finally take the quiz. And I was actually a pretty good speller, or at the very least, I was really good at memorizing, because that's really what a lot of school is. It's just rewarding the ability to remember and repeat. But I I was in a bit of a slump for um, a few weeks straight, where I just kept getting straight C's. And I mean, mom was just like, she just wanted to, like, keep the incentive going of, like, well, if I just let you do it for that, then you're just gonna slide in all your other studies. And also, in her defense, it's like, I'm not asking for much. You get 10 words a week. Like, give me a break. But I remember I was just tired of this dry spell. And I was like, oh God, I'm just itching to rent a new video game. I'm so over this. And then I got it back, and I got like a 75 or whatever, and or like a, like a 7 out of 10. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. What mama don't know can't hurt her. And I remember she picked me up and she said, well, how'd it go? And I go, oh yeah, 10 out of 10, mom. I got it back. And keep in mind, this was in third grade, and for 1 year I was going to Catholic school, so I feel like my lie this time was actually a double sin. I lied about a test in Catholic school, so I just feel like that's worse. And mom took me to the Blockbuster in downtown Cumberland, and went around, picked out the game, and it was like, ooh, Croc. And or at least I think it was the first Croc. Are you telling me it was Croc 2, or
Well, from what you mentioned, it sounds like you played Croc 1.
okay. So it was Croc 1. It was
Yeah.
just Croc. Because I got to the part, I guess it's the last boss on the. Well, I thought I was about to beat the game, but you ruined that you ruined that mystical childhood nostalgia for me. Apparently, I was only just gonna
Like a
defeat.
quarter of the way through the game.
Yeah, like one third, 1/4 into it. I was about to get off the first island. I think I got to the top of the island, and I was gonna fight like the ladybug with boxing gloves.
Yep, that
And
is the final boss of the first island.
okay, all right. Well, I don't know if I should feel worse or better about this story, but anyway, I thought I was about to beat the whole game, which I'd never done before at this age. I played video games, but like I just wasn't that good at them. And yeah, I just needed easy games. And so anyway, I lied, told my mom I aced the spelling test. She just took my word for it. I was like, oh, I have so many books on top of it. It's at the bottom of my bag. I'll just show you later. And I play this game Friday, Saturday, and it's Sunday night. And I'm sure you're all thinking, oh my God, like, all weekend and you were still only on the first island. Again, I was really bad. I was really bad at video games.
I mean, hey, in your
And
defense, the first Croc game is honestly kind of difficult.
yeah. So finally, it was Sunday night, and I'm about to beat this like ladybug boxing glove person. And my mom just goes, "Where's your spelling test?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I think I left it in my locker." And she goes, "You don't have a locker." And I'm like, "Oh, right. I, I think I left it at my desk." And she's like, "You take everything home at the end of the weekend." Oh, I think I threw it away. So she digs in my book bag. She sees that fat ass 7, and she turns it off. And I'm like, shit. So that is another story added to the lore of Donnie and I's friendship, is that he's like, one day I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to let you play the rest of Croc and you can finally finish it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I remember recently on Facebook, I shared that I found my old like Blockbuster membership card. And I just said in the caption, "Oh, nothing was better than getting to rent something after acing your weekly test." And Donnie just goes, "Yeah, ace." And I'm just like, I lied one fucking time.
Oh, yeah, one day we will sit down and we'll play Croc, and if you're feeling it, we'll play Croc too. I still have
Yeah.
both of those games, and yeah, like looking back, like get back on the subject of forgotten video game mascots. Like I remember, like Croc being pretty popular. Like I remember seeing a lot of advertisements for him, and I remember like playing and being like, "Damn, he there's stuff in this game that like isn't even in like the Crash Bandicoot or Spyro games." Like,
Well, I think they were all popular in their own way, and that's why they kept getting sequels.
yeah,
Like
but it's weird. Like,
Spyro was popular, and
Yeah, but what's weird is like Croc only got the one sequel, and then he was just like never heard from again.
yeah.
It's
I
just
feel like by now they would like revive a couple of these guys, like
yeah,
like just to, I don't know, just to do something. And I feel like, I mean, with all due respect to the brand and the intellectual property, I feel like to make one of these games now would not be that time consuming or difficult. It wouldn't be like, for example, the most recent God of War game,
right.
or Grand Theft Auto 6 whenever that finally comes out.
Yeah, and it's just weird how a lot of these characters, despite being as popular as they were, just fizzled out. Like the big one for me is Sly Cooper. Like I understand why Crash Bandicoot fizzled out for a while because after Naughty Dog gave up the property, like the game's just progressively declined to the point that we were begging it to be put out of its misery. um,
Yeah, yeah.
and the same thing with Spyro too, in all honesty. But like Sly Cooper was like, because you had the first three games on PS2, and they were all good. And I think, in my opinion, the second one's the best one still. And then just this, after the third one, just 8 years of nothing, and they were like, surprise, here's another one for PS3, which was also good. It had its flaws, but it was still a good game. Um, and nothing's been heard of that franchise ever since that game, and that game was like 10 years ago, I think.
And then I remember, and I'm still like salty and sour over this. I remember they released like an announcement teaser trailer for like a Sly
Yeah,
Cooper movie,
yeah,
where it would, it would have been an all CGI movie, and like the animation just, which is, this is very rare. I feel like the animation would have just exactly resembled the animation of the game itself, like the cutscenes and whatnot. Which I'm like, I feel like that would have been a very safe and smart move. So they released this announcement teaser, and then it just never happened.
yeah.
I
It's
mean,
funny
do you?
you could that like that trailer is still on YouTube too.
Like, did you ever? I think you told me the full story of what happened there. I think like the animation house or studio like just went out of business, or
Well, what I read was that the Ratchet and Clank movie underperformed, and it caused them to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this movie.
which I would have just think that would have just been because the Ratchet and Clank movie didn't look that good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I thought the Sly Cooper movie looked way better, but
Well, then, and
um,
then like a couple years after that, they announced that a Sly Cooper like TV series was supposed to drop at some point, and they're like, yeah, I think this was like 2019. They're like, yeah, October 2019, it's coming out, and then nothing was ever heard beyond that.
I am gonna go ahead and predict that if this like new Super Mario Brothers movie from Illumination blows up and like is a mega hit, like that will open the floodgates to all these animation studios trying to gobble up the rights to whatever of these characters they can.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like that's going to happen. I feel like DreamWorks is going to get somebody, and well, Blue Sky Studios doesn't exist anymore. The Ice Age people, but you get what I'm getting at.
yeah,
Which,
yeah,
like, yeah, I think if the Super Mario Brothers movie does really, really good, everybody's going to be like, oh shit, like let's get our own Super Mario.
yeah,
So, but I mean, yeah, I just I don't know. That is frustrating. I feel like I kind of miss that era of these characters that that
yeah.
that you're talking about. And then
Well,
I just felt like
it's also like you don't really see like that kind of,
mascots.
yeah, you
Yeah.
don't really, or at least not in that form. Like, I mean, yeah, Nintendo has like Mario and Donkey Kong and Zelda, but like Mario is really the only one you really see consistently anymore. Um,
Yeah. And then I
and
feel like the only other one was like Xbox had Master Chief,
yeah,
but
which nobody cares about him animore.
yeah, because well,
And
I think they finally realized that Master Chief is a
not a
very
character.
boring character. Yeah, he's not a character. He's like, yeah.
He,
So
and then, but and Sony still kind of has like they have Aloy from Horizon, and then they have Kratos from God of War, but like it's not like it was in the 90s and 2000s, and it's just weird how like despite the popularity of those things and despite like the fact that most of them honestly could have continued far longer than they did, it just sort of there was just one day where they just weren't a thing anymore.
yeah, I don't know. I would have really liked for like the time splitters games to become much more iconic than they were. Like
Hmm.
the second one for the GameCube and PS2 era and Xbox, the first Xbox, like it was pretty popular. Like and it won like awards for magazines and stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's just I just feel like it was made obsolete by like Halo and Call of Duty coexisting then.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I'm trying to think of who I would want to come back more. Um, I mean, speaking of Naughty Dog, like you and I should marathon the Jack and Daxter trilogy sometime because I do hear that like those games were pretty damn good,
I'd be
especially
down.
2 and 3.
I'd be down because I only ever played the first one. Um,
Oh, I hear it kept topping itself. Like I hear like they kept upping it, like
yeah,
cranking it up.
I
Uh,
would totally be down for that because yeah, I only ever played the first Jack and Daxter on PS2. I never got to play two, three, or the racing game. Um,
the racing game was fun. I did play of all things. I did play the racing game, and that racing game was damn fun.
well,
Um,
this was also made by Naughty Dog, but Crash Team Racing. If you played the Jack racing game, how come you're not good at Crash Team Racing?
um, I guess like the physics and dynamics were different. I don't know, but um, first also I never said I was good at it. I just said it was fun. I never I played I played it on easy mode. I never had to play another person on it, but I did the story mode.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, I just feel like it would have because in Crash Team Racing it's more like go kart based, and in the Jack racing game it's like an actual like Mad Max Fury Road type shit.
Man,
Um,
those are some fun memories us playing Crash Team Racing.
yeah, yeah, but um, because the first Jack and Daxter is just like what
It's
like a,
basic.
a platformer.
Yeah, like the first Jack and Daxter, you could tell like, okay, these guys just got off of making Crash Bandicoot.
Right. And then in the second game, and the third game is closer to the second game than the second game is to the first game. I feel like two and three are closer together than one is to them. It almost feels like one's like a prequel. But anyway, in the second game, because Halo and even Time Splitters was out at the time, they were like, oh well, we have to add like a shooter element to it, and that could have easily like backfired and like collapsed in on itself, been like, oh, it's so desperate, it tried to be other games instead of just being itself. But apparently like it worked really well, and it was like a very smooth evolution of the gameplay. So
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll have a sleepover one day. We'll order some pizza. We'll marathon Jack and Daxter, and then we'll marathon Sly Cooper.
and yes, yep, deal.
Because the best way to describe Sly Cooper is it's like a playable like Saturday morning cartoon.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I'll make sure that that's one of the next times I visit.
All right. Well, then let's move on into our next subject, next topic that I kind of had in mind for tonight, and that is Ghostbusters. We all know them. We all love them. Um, but one thing I've noticed about Ghostbusters is, and they have tried many a time, but they just for whatever reason cannot seem to like turn Ghostbusters into a full-fledged franchise, on the scale of like Marvel or DC or what have you. Like, and they've tried every few years they try again and it just doesn't work. And I just think it's really interesting, the history of the Ghostbusters brand. Because I
Yeah.
mean, we had the original movie, which is obviously a classic, and then we had Ghostbusters 2, which was what, 5 years later. Um,
Yes, it was 1984 to 1989.
yeah, and the gap between Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 is like as large as the Grand Canyon. Like, it's very obvious that Ghostbusters 2 was made because they were like, oh shit, people have like forgotten about us, so we need to like cash in quick before it's too late. Um, it's where like I think the closest they ever got to like really turning the Ghostbusters into a big franchise was like in the 90s when they had a cartoon.
Hmm.
They
Which
had,
it was honestly like an underrated cartoon in a way, I think.
I don't really remember. I remember watching it as a kid, but I don't have any like clear, distinct memories of any of the episodes or anything. I remember Egon being blonde for some reason, and that's it.
Right. I would rent the VHS tapes from like Potomac Video or whatever like the main video store chain was in like the outer Pittsburgh area,
Hmm.
when I would visit like friends and family in Pittsburgh. And like this was a big thing in the 90s. Like today we're so used to obviously streaming, but then before that we were so used to DVD box sets where they would have like the series and the seasons in chronological order. Well, in the
Hmm.
90s they did this thing where like they would just have like
A couple
VHS
episodes.
VHS tapes that was like a grab bag. It wasn't
Yeah.
like it was just like a random selection of a few. They weren't necessarily in order, or it wasn't like a certain arc. Um, but yeah, it would be like a VHS tape of like what, three or four episodes,
Yeah.
and so that was interesting how they would do that. But yeah,
Yeah. I think that's the closest they ever got to turning the Ghostbusters into like a big thing. But then like once that cartoon ended, like there was nothing to do with Ghostbusters until the 2016 movie with Melissa McCarthy and um, I'm drawing a blank on her name for some reason.
Kristen Wiig.
Yes, thank you.
Well, there's another distinct point in the timeline though, before between the two that you just mentioned. So sometime between, and first of all, I just want to go back to like adulthood and growing up is admitting that Ghostbusters 2 is not that great. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that is very much like as a teenager or preteen, I would have been like, man, what are you talking about? But now I'm like, oh yes, no, people. I feel like I feel like Ghostbusters 2 is very guilty of inspiring nostalgia goggles and
yeah,
rose tinted glasses.
yeah.
It's just simply not as good. I mean, and it's like I don't really know what more to say about it than that. It's just 5 years later they tried to make a forced follow up to a near perfect comedy blockbuster, and
It didn't
I
work.
mean, it's I don't want to ever accuse it of being bad, but I just feel like if I go the rest of my life without ever rewatching it, I won't be upset. Like I
Ghostbusters
should
2016 is better than Ghostbusters 2.
um honestly, like it's more inspired. Like I don't know, like it tried to just be itself. I mean, we'll get to Ghostbusters 2016 in a second, which I want everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. Like you're listening to two like 30-year-old white guys talking about Ghostbusters 2016. It's okay. Like it's not going to go the way you think it is. Like we're not every angry dude on YouTube a few years ago.
Yeah,
But anyway, what I was trying to get at is, yeah, Ghostbusters 2 is not that great. And then those cartoons happened, and they made toys based on the cartoons,
yeah.
which I had some of those, and I actually like them. But so then what happened was, and I don't know if this was when you were paying attention to movie news yet, like we do now, Donnie, but while we were in high school, like 2018, they actually announced Ghostbusters 3. That like,
2018. We weren't in high
or
school in
I'm
2018.
sorry. Will you hold on a second? Like I meant 2008. 2008. That's what I meant. So in 2008, they like announced Ghostbusters 3, and like Harold Ramis was going to write it, or he had asked like the guys who wrote that Year One comedy with Michael Cera and Jack Black
Hmm.
to do it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're going to get everybody to come back." And like so between 2008 and 2016, for an entire Barack Obama. Um, it was this back and forth of Harold Ramis begging Bill Murray to do it again, and Bill Murray saying "Meow."
Oh yeah, because he and Bill Murray were not. Well, no, Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray were not friends at the time.
Yeah, I
Well,
feel like, and
I don't think Bill Murray was friends with anybody at the time.
yeah, I feel like, yeah. Apparently, Bill Murray's like kind of a dickhead in real life. Which, on one hand, I'm like, why are we surprised by that? And then, um, I'm sure I'm sure Bill Murray wasn't interested in being friends with Dan Aykroyd because Dan Aykroyd was going on Larry King and being like that aliens won't ever want to come meet us after 9/11 and shit
Yeah,
like that. And
yeah.
it's like what is, and he sounded like Crystal Skull vodka or whatever, and it's like, what are you talking about? um but yeah, so in 2008 they announced the attempt to make a Ghostbusters 3, and for several years, it was just this back and forth of like Harold Ramis sending Bill Murray a script and Bill Murray ripping it up and mailing it back to him.
Which
And
it's funny that Bill Murray was just like so adamant about like fuck no, I'm not doing that because this talk reminded me of another point in the timeline. I want to say this was like maybe 2000. It was around the same time. It was not too long after 2008. I'll have to look when it actually came out, but there was a Ghostbusters video game that came out on like PS3 and 360 around this time.
it was like
Um,
2000. It was 2009. I was going to get to the like around that time in a second, but you go ahead and talk about the video game. Go ahead.
because I still have the PS3 game. It was remade recently for PS4 and whatnot. Came out 2009. And honestly, it was a great fucking game. And it's basic. The story is basically like this is Ghostbusters 3. And like it's weird that Bill Murray was so adamant about not doing a third movie because he came back and did the voice acting for the video game that is basically Ghostbusters 3. Um, like it was a great game, and you know what? It was one of the few games that I played like heavily on the multiplayer. Like the multiplayer was a ton of fun too.
It looked like a damn fun game.
It was. I'll have to
I
get the
never
remaster sometime.
I never got to play like the legit realistic version of the game.
Oh, you played the
Um,
Wii version where they all look like cartoonish and whatnot.
I played the PS2 version that was based
Oh,
on the Wii version, and I didn't have a PS3 at the time, so that was why. But um, well, I guess like Bill Murray's like splitting of hairs cop out there is like, oh well, I just did voice acting for my younger self because the game takes place in
91.
1990 or 91, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, nobody wants to see us like come back in an actual movie in live action where we're as old as we are now."
Yeah.
And then I mean, we'll fast forward to later in the timeline eventually, but the last thing I was going to leave it on was in 2009 it was the 25th anniversary of Ghostbusters 1. It
Hmm.
was a quarter of a century old. And even though there was no like cemented or solidified production for Ghostbusters 3, like all these like all this marketing for the anniversary of Ghostbusters like blew the fuck up. Like they were making t-shirts all over again. They were making hats. They were making book bags. They were making like those Live Strong bracelets, but it was
Hmm.
like it was like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and shit.
Yeah.
And like they like threw all this money out of making Ghostbusters merchandise all over again, even though there was no show, there was no movie even on the horizon. And I guess it was like, oh well, there's a game coming out that looks really that looks like it's going to be popular, and it's essentially Ghostbusters 3. But yeah, like I remember I had so many new t-shirts of Ghostbusters, and I had like bracelets and lanyards and whatnot. And so yeah, that's where I was going to leave it. So then we can fast forward to 2016. You go ahead.
Yeah. So then we get to 2016. We have since there's no Ghostbusters 3, they just decided to do the all-female Ghostbusters reboot, and the internet got mad. And it's just, I remember we had the conversation at the time because the big argument that these people were making is, why are you rebooting Ghostbusters? Some stuff should just be left alone. And it's just like we've rebooted like damn near everything at this point. Why
Yeah.
is this the one where you draw the line? Why is
Yeah.
this the one where you get upset? Like,
Yeah.
and like I'll be the first to say that when they announced an all-female Ghostbusters, I'm like, oh okay, whatever. Hey, more Ghostbusters, I'm for it. When they announced who the team would be, I was like, oh no, because Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig, I'm not a fan of either of them. Um, the second they announced who it was, I'm like, great, Melissa McCarthy's going to fall over and shout about it, and Kristen Wiig is going to get covered in something gooey and be kind of sexual about it. And sure enough, when they released that first trailer, both of those things happened in that first trailer. But I was like, you know what? The trailer does not make the full movie. I'll still go see the movie because it's Ghostbusters, and I'll give it a chance. And you know what? I saw the movie. It's fine. Like it's not bad at all. It's honestly, it's got some pretty good fucking humor in it. I loved Chris Hemsworth in that movie. How they like flipped the script on like the dumb blonde stereotype where he's the
Yeah.
dumb blonde.
Yeah. He basically mocked himself in a way that, and we're going to come back to this movie series in a few minutes, or unless you're unaware of this too. But um, anyway, Chris Hemsworth kind of mocked himself in the same way Channing Tatum mocked himself in 21 Jump Street,
Yeah,
or Mark Wahlberg mocked himself in The Other Guys. But I mean, I'm not going to be two faced about it. I'm not going to be like, oh, I was always perfect. I was always on the right side of history. But like, no, when they first announced like an all female Ghostbusters reboot, I was kind of a douchebag about it. Like I reacted in a very toxic way at the time. And again, like I was not excited for the cast.
yeah,
For the same reasons that you had said, like I had liked Bridesmaids, but I'm like, I would have never watched Bridesmaids and put all them in Ghostbusters.
yeah,
Um, I just feel like, if they would have done one where it was like Anna Kendrick and Aubrey Plaza and at the time Ellen Page, but now Elliot Page, like I would have been like, oh, sign me the fuck up.
yeah.
But I just wasn't excited for who they got. And yes, like that first trailer was not funny, but
No.
like you, I stuck around, I gave it a chance, and I was like, you know what? Everybody else needs to calm down. Like all these dudes on the internet, like your childhood already happened. Like nothing can take that away from you. Like stop trying to relive your childhood over and over again. Like you simultaneously want the same thing over and over again, but then you complain that nothing is new or different, or they keep rebooting stuff. And like, I was working at the theater at the time that the 2016 movie was released, and a group of young girls came out of it at the end, and they were so happy and excited with it, and they were talking about their favorite moments and whatnot. And I'm like, that is what it's all about.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
this is more important than like all these dudes in their 30s and 40s who were upset that like everything is in a carbon copy of 1984 all over again. Like,
yeah,
it's about, we have new kids now, let's make new memories for those kids. And in that way it succeeded. Like,
yeah.
thumbs up. um and at least the difference between, and I never saw Ghostbusters Afterlife, but my critique of it was like, the trailer looked like JJ Abrams Super 8, which I was like really confused about because it was making it this like sentimental like um adventure mystery.
Hmm.
Say what you will, but at least the 2016 movie understood that Ghostbusters is supposed to be a fucking comedy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And
they,
like
they keep
I
go
saw
ahead, go
I
ahead.
saw Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I mean, like, oh hey, finally we get the actual third, like we actually get the follow up to Ghostbusters 2. Which one, I'm like, okay, so we're just gonna tell the crew from 2016 tough luck, cool. Um, whatever happens, I guess. And I mean, Afterlife, it was all right, it was fine. I mean, it's very much one of those things where it's just like there's a difference between things being bad and things just not being for me. And this is a case where it's just one of those things. It's just not necessarily for me. Not to say that, like on its face, Afterlife, it's a decent movie, but it is very much made for kids who are growing up like now. You know, the kids who are growing up on stuff like Stranger Things and whatnot. Like it's made for those kids. And
Right,
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's fine that those kids have their own like targeted media that's made specifically for them.
right.
um, because we had our own targeted media that was made specifically for us.
Yeah,
So, I mean, Afterlife, it's fine. It's just, yeah, kind of like what you said. It kind of like doesn't understand the assignment of the original one in a way.
yeah,
And then there's also, I also just had like the whole movie is just a giant plot hole to me because, they're like, oh man, we're investigating all these ghosts. What? Like, oh, whatever. Ghosts aren't real. It's like, motherfucker, this is like they're on YouTube watching the aftermath of like the first movie. It's just like, it's only been 30 years since actual ghosts attacked New York City. I think people would be more open to the idea of ghosts in this movie.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I never saw it, but
I also hate
that,
that like the mom in the movie is like middle aged when she's like supposed to be our age.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
well, it's like because she has two kids in the movie and they're both like one's like 15 and the other one's like just a couple years younger. And I'm like, bitch, you were born no later than, or no earlier, I should say, or whatever, than 1990. So
yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, it has like the one kid from Stranger Things, Mike or whatever, like Finn
yeah,
Wolford or whatever.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I am not old enough to be that guy's dad yet. Like,
no,
I refuse to
no,
believe that.
no,
But um, it's, and yeah, like, back to my point, like, it's just weird how when people try to remember, a lot of these guys, when they try to remember Ghostbusters, and again, like, it was a fun, like, it was a fun movie, and it was like, it did have like a, with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and like, before the Avengers, like, it was like the OG and like the Battle of New York City.
yeah.
But people try to remember it for being more epic than it was. Like, again, it was a comedy. Like, it was a outrageous,
It
like,
was a comedy science fiction blockbuster made by a lot of Saturday Night Live people.
yeah, yeah, it was made by the guys who did like,
Like it's
you
basic
know,
like Ghostbusters is basically the most successful Saturday Night Live movie ever.
yes, amen. And like, again, with Afterlife, amongst other people, they're almost under the impression that the original Ghostbusters was made by Steven Spielberg instead of Ivan Reitman. And
Yeah.
what's funny about that is that Ghostbusters Afterlife was made by Ivan Reitman's son, like Jason Reitman, who made Juno and Thank You for Smoking and um, other stuff. And it's like, your own dad made the original, and you're like, you don't even remember that movie correctly.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of funny. But and I and I thought it was interesting how he was the one who made it, and his pitch, his him trying to make his case for being the one to do it was solid because he was like, my dad was making the original movie and I would visit him during production and I would be on set and he's like, I got to see the puppets for Slimer and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man before any other kid in the world got to.
Hmm.
So in a way, I was the first fan ever. And I'm like, that's very fair. Like that's a good point, touche.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just, and then back to what I was gonna say about Jump Street. Like I don't know if you remember this, but there was a moment where, or am I misremembering? It was either like they were going to make a crossover between 21 Jump Street
They
and
were.
Men in Black,
They
or they
were.
were going to
It
make,
was gonna be Men in
yeah.
Black. Yeah.
Oh shit! I thought for a second I got it. I got the streams
No.
crossed with Ghostbusters,
Which
but
I don't know why they thought that was an idea that should happen, but
well, if anything, make a crossover between Men in
Men in
Black
Black
and
and
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's
Which is
like,
speaking of weird crossovers, because it's like kind of circling back to the original point of like how I think it's so weird that every few years they try, but they fail to make Ghostbusters into like a larger franchise. Remember a few years ago where they did that comic crossover of the Ghostbusters and the Ninja Turtles?
which I'd even buy into that.
I mean, I'd buy into it more than 21 Jump Street and Men in Black, sure, but it's still like, why are these two together?
Well, they basically wanted to make 1984 the movie.
True.
Those were the two biggest things in 1984. All you had to do is also have like a giant like mechanized tank that's a Super Nintendo, and that's it. You got it.
That's true.
Yeah. So
But yeah, yeah, because it's like again circling back to how they failed to make Ghostbusters a franchise. Because we got Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it's fine, and by all conventional standards, it did well and was a success. But there's been no talk of the franchise since that movie.
well, they're making a sequel to Afterlife right now, right?
Are they?
Yes. Like
I've
it
heard
literally
I've
comes.
heard absolutely nothing about it.
It is under the what do you call it, like the production title. Like sometimes a movie has like a secret code name while it's filming.
Yeah.
It's under the code name Firehouse,
Huh.
and it is supposed to come out this December, I guess.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's not.
I have
Ivan
heard.
Reitman is not, or I'm sorry, Ivan Reitman passed away.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Jason Reitman is not directing it, but he's producing it. Some new guy is directing it, I think.
Yeah, because like I said, I've heard absolutely not a single word about it. Like Afterlife came out, and then it went, and then that was it. Like I've heard nothing about Ghostbusters since then.
Well, it also, yeah, it doesn't help that Ghostbusters Afterlife was one of the first cinematic casualties of COVID
Yeah,
19.
yeah,
Like it was supposed to come out summer 2020, and then it got bumped a year or so.
yeah.
And I was like, we had been seeing different trailers for it over the course of like 15, 18 months, and I'm
Hmm.
like, by the time I didn't give a shit if this movie would have come out on time, but I feel like by the time this movie was going to come out, I really didn't give a shit. So, yeah, no, it's an interesting topic. Thank you for that.
Well, hopefully with this next movie, that'll finally be like the one that finally does it, where Ghostbusters becomes a major franchise that they've been trying to make it.
I still like the idea of what they were going to do with Ghost Corps, where they were just going to make different movies of like obviously we've seen
Like
the
different
New York,
academies across the like there was gonna be like a
right,
West Coast Ghostbusters Academy.
right, like we
Like
we've seen,
that would have been perfect.
yeah, like we've seen New York City, so we were going to see like Los Angeles
Which,
or Miami or
if I
whatever.
remember correctly, that's what was going to spawn the all female Ghostbusters movie. Was they were going to be like from the West Coast Academy or whatever.
Yeah, and I just feel like I would have been all about that, where every movie you get like a different team, like a new roster or
Yeah,
whatever.
like the X-Men.
Right, right. Which I would have been all about that. And just for clarity, like when I did finally see 2016 Ghostbusters, there was plenty of moments with Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy that I did like.
Yeah,
They just didn't show any of them in the trailers, which I guess that's a good thing because we complain about the trailers showing all the best bits and parts. But yeah, I feel like Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig had plenty of good jokes in the movie itself. We just didn't get them in the trailers. So
My
for
my
whatever
biggest
reason,
my biggest problem with the 2016 Ghostbusters movie is that nobody in that movie knows how to like function like an actual human being. Like nobody knows how to do anything without being cringy and or awkward.
the thing that they pointed out was that like in the original, and not to keep being like, 30-year-old guy who can't get over like this, old movie, but in the original they had a different dynamic. Like Bill Murray was the chill one,
Hmm.
and Egon was like the straight up dork, and then Winston was the cool guy, like the new guy, and Dan Aykroyd was like the I don't know what would you call him, but
He
anyway,
was he was the easily excitable nerd.
in in the 2016 one in the 2016 one, they all try to be the crazy kooky one, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay, well, you can't all be the crazy one. Like, you need
yeah.
to have like a balance here. But you know again, that's again, it's still more rewatchable than 1989.
Yeah. It's not as good as the original, but it's better than Ghostbusters 2, and honestly, that's all it needs to be.
Again, I'll say at least it understood that Ghostbusters is supposed to be a comedy.
Yeah.
So
All right, well, let's move into our last segment of the evening where we get petty and we read some posts from the subreddit Am I the Asshole? And we'll take judgment on them. Uh, I got two here. You want to do them both tonight?
I mean, as of right now, I'm good if you're good.
All righty then. Well, then we'll start with this one. Posted 4 days ago. Am I the asshole for not reimbursing my nanny for books she bought for my daughter?
I feel like this can go either way.
Yeah. So, my daughter, Ruby, is 12. Recently, she has gotten into the original Star Trek show as well as The Next Generation. Ruby is also a big reader and has started to collect a few of the old Star Trek books that she finds in used bookstores and thrift stores. These books usually cost anywhere from 50 cents to a couple of dollars. My nanny, Tessa, who's 22, hangs out with Ruby most days after she gets out of school. Tessa has been our nanny for over a year now, and she and Ruby get along great. Tessa is big into thrifting and will often keep an eye out for the books Ruby wants. This is not typically a problem as Ruby always pays Tessa back for the books using her allowance. The problem occurred when Tessa went on a family vacation out west. Apparently, she went thrifting during this trip and found some books for Ruby. She texted Ruby asking her if she wanted the books, and Ruby said yes. Well, Tessa returned yesterday with a stack of about 35 books and told Ruby they cost $50. Ruby doesn't have this much money and told Tessa. Tessa then asked me if I would cover the cost. I said no, as Tessa had never asked me about buying Ruby the books, nor was I aware of the conversation between the two of them. Tessa got upset, and I asked Ruby to show me the text, which made no mention of price or even the amount of books she was buying. Tessa only said that she found some books for Ruby. Ruby is on the autism spectrum and does not read between the lines. You have to be very literal with her. Previously, Tessa has never bought Ruby more than one or two books at a time, so I told her that she should have clarified with Ruby regarding the amount or double checked with me before purchasing, and that I would not be paying the $50. Tessa said she could not return the books because they came from the thrift store. I stood firm in my decision and reiterated that she should have asked me first. Tessa left and Ruby is very upset. I know Tessa is a student and does not have a ton of money, so am I the asshole for not paying Tessa for the books? And there's a couple edits here for some more context. First one, because some people are asking, I am a single parent to Ruby, and while $50 will not make her break the bank, it is definitely an unexpected expense. I provide Tessa with an extra amount of money each month to spend on whatever she wants to do with Ruby, movies, the mall, etc. If she wanted to spend this fund on books for Ruby, that would have been totally fine, but she had already used it up. And edit number two, I definitely didn't expect this post to blow up overnight, so I'm going to add a bit more context. For those of you who are asking how I can afford a nanny for Ruby and still have $50 be a large unexpected expense, I do not pay for Tessa's services because Ruby is on the spectrum. She is entitled to benefits from our state, including care. The agency I work with pays Tessa. I am not involved in that process at all. So that's where we will leave it. Is the mom the asshole?
Um, I'm so sorry. The whole time you were reading that, I was assuming it was a dad. I don't
No.
know. I don't know why I missed that part. My
Well,
apologies. I still got literally everything else,
okay.
um, but
Would it have mattered
um,
if it was a dad?
no. It was just like I was
Well, I guess it doesn't. It
sometimes.
doesn't. I guess it doesn't say. It just says single parent.
Oh, okay.
So
Um, so yeah, my bad. Sometimes I just get mad at myself for not like really like having all the details sink in and whatnot. I was like, I was totally paying attention. How did I miss that part? But yeah, it's anyway. Sorry. Um, it's a bit of a touchy situation. Like I can understand why there would be sore feelings all around.
hmm
Um, I don't I don't want to say asshole because of the situation. I just think it's a very sensitive misunderstanding, and I feel bad for everyone in the scenario. And I know that sounds like a cop out, but I will say this is what I would do personally. This is how I would do it. On one hand, it's like that is not the parents' problem at all. It's
hmm
like that was a deal like outside of their awareness and whatnot. But
It's also
what?
it's the fact that it's 35 fucking books.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a stack of 35 books. Like
Yeah, it's like you could have been like, okay, you could have done a FaceTime or done like a series of picture text messages being like, I'll get you 5 or 10. Which ones do you want the most or
yeah.
whatever? Um, so yeah, it was definitely wrong of the nanny for taking it upon themselves to, get as many as they got.
hmm
But again, like they are still like young in a way, so we all make kind of boneheaded decisions like that, especially when we're young. What I would do is I would just turn it into a lesson. I would suck it up and pay them back, but I would be like, hey, I'm going to pay you back this time, but I'm going to insist never do that again. Like, do not let that happen again. This shouldn't be my problem. I shouldn't have to fix this, but just so there's no bad blood or hard feelings, or we don't ruin a good thing like we've got going on right now, and for the sake of keeping the peace, I would pay her back. But again, I would insist this can't happen again. So that's kind of my feelings on it.
Yeah, I don't think the parent is the asshole at all. Like I mean, you put it perfectly. Like the whole conversation was entirely outside the parent's awareness and didn't involve the parent at all. Um, so it's just like, how could I have known that you were going to buy all these books? I didn't tell you to buy all these books. And it's also, again, it's the fact that it's 35 goddamn books. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like, it's appreciated. I appreciate what you're doing. You're, doing something for my kid. But at the same time, like, at book like 10, you didn't think that's enough. Anything more would be a bit excessive.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and it's also like, for me, it's just kind of like I don't know what you're doing buying $50 worth of books and thinking a 12-year-old is just going to have $50 to give you back. Like,
yeah. There was definitely a lack of common sense,
yeah,
and foresight. But I guess that's where like I would turn it into a lesson, like sit them down and be like, hey, listen, like here's what's owed in a way, even though it I shouldn't owe you, it shouldn't be my problem, but
yeah,
I would really turn it into a lecture. I would really turn it into like a real focused lesson of, now do you understand why I'm upset that I'm doing this right now?
yeah.
So yeah, it's
And
just
there is an update at the end where basically the parent says they did exactly that. The parent said they paid the nanny back and, talked to them and was like, yeah, don't do this again. I'm not paying you back if it happens again.
yeah.
And
So
just, lesson learned, which, because they said, sometimes it's better to salvage a relationship, and for the long run, which,
yeah,
I think that's fair, especially considering it's somebody that is assisting your child and somebody that your child very much enjoys being around. Um, but yeah, like definitely like parent is not the asshole at all, but the nanny definitely lacks a lot of common sense. Like, I don't know where you're thinking a 12-year-old is just going to have $50 to give you, you know?
Yeah, when you do a gesture like that, a part of you needs to like prepare for the fact that it will be assumed or accepted as a gift.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah. So I guess in the end, like the poster agreed with my sentiments because they did exactly that. So yeah, I feel pretty good about where I left it there.
All right. Well, then we will move to the next one. Am I the asshole for lying that my dad was having an affair to prove that my stepmom reads my diary?
This one should be a little more funny.
This one was posted 9 hours ago and it's already got 17,000 upvotes.
Oh fuck.
So, 16-year-old female, my stepmom, 40-year-old female, Ariel, is really immature and honestly acts like a 9-year-old sometimes. She's the type of person who makes fun of someone for having a hearing aid or wearing glasses. She also says bigoted things. For example, there was someone on TV wearing a turban, and Ariel said, "Ew, why would anyone want to look like a Muslim?" So I do my best to avoid her. But Ariel won't stop reading my diary. I found out because she said I wrote rude things about her cousin Loretta and tried to punish me over it. I didn't write anything rude about Loretta, just that she was condescending to me and I didn't like her comments. Dad just told me to respect adults and didn't say anything to Ariel about reading my diary. I've moved the diary multiple times, but Ariel keeps finding it and reading it. She'll make comments and say things that she would only know about from actively reading my diary. I've told my dad and he won't do anything. He makes an excuse that, oh, you don't know Ariel reads your diary, when she clearly does. I got fed up with it. So I tried talking to Ariel one more time about respecting my privacy and not reading my diary. I then wrote in my diary that I caught my dad having an affair with our neighbor Michael. Ariel ended up reading my diary the next day and freaked out. She yelled at my dad, went to Michael's house, yelled at Michael, and then she drove somewhere else. My family on my mom and stepdad's side all thought it was super funny and told me that I taught Ariel an overdue lesson about respecting privacy and not being nosy. But Ariel and my family on my dad's side are furious with me and I'm still grounded at his house. They said that Ariel is just curious and wants to know what's going on in my life. And I should appreciate that Ariel wants to be involved instead of embarrassing the family in front of the neighborhood. Am I the asshole?
No, absolutely not. Your stepmom is a Arrested Development moron bitch, and your father is a coward. He is a fucking pussy, and you gave her a taste of her. Well, I don't want to say you gave her a taste of her own medicine. That's not the phrase there. You you played her game. Like you met her on the playing field, and you got down to it. You tried to take the high road. You tried to take the mature route, and it wasn't working. So you know what? No, I think what she did was glorious. And yeah, fuck her stepmom and her dad.
You called your stepmom's bluff and she was only holding a two.
Yes. Yeah. No. No. Well played to whoever wrote it. So
So my thing is with this here is, yes, the stepmom is painted in a very bad light. She makes fun of people and she says bigoted things. I'm trying to keep in mind this is a 16-year-old, so I don't know how much of these things we can take at face value.
sure.
Because I know I remember when I was 16. You just kind of blow
Mm-hmm.
stuff out of proportion, you get worked up and whatnot. That being said, uh, you know, parents reading your diary or your journal or whatever, I don't know. I can understand like doing it out of like, hey, I just want to know what's going on in your life, but it's like also at the same time, like I know I just said this is a 16-year-old, but at the same time, this is a 16-year-old, not a 6-year-old. Like if you want to know what's going on in their life, talk to your kid. Um,
I, I mean, I'm now that you bring that up, I'm torn on it. I think it go either way because honestly, I have met some. I mean, you can agree with me here. We have met some horrible people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and I have met some teenagers that were damn honest people and
yeah,
good people,
yeah,
and like in that sense, like you know, just because you're young doesn't mean you can't have a sense of good and honesty and truth.
Hmm.
And just because you're older can't doesn't mean you're not a piece of shit. I would
Yeah.
dare say most pieces of shit in the world happen to be older people.
Yeah.
Um, so no, the stepmom is still wrong because she at least doesn't practice the whole thing of like, okay, if I'm gonna read it, I can't hold anything against her,
Yeah.
especially if it's inconsequential,
Yeah.
because her trying to make a stink over the fact that she quote unquote said something rude about, what was it, her sister
Her
or
cousin.
her cousin, like that's off limits. Like who gives a shit? Let her vent. Like let her, basically, writing in a diary, you're just talking to yourself. Like let her vent however she wants to vent. Give her that sense of free will and also free speech. And not even just free speech, like it's not like she's like saying it to the public or whatever, she's just saying it to herself. So like leave her alone. and and yeah, so it's like if you're going to look through it, you shouldn't hold the stuff against her, especially if it's stuff that in the grand scheme of things means no harm to you. So no, that stepmom still sucks.
I, yeah, I kind of feel bad for the neighbor Michael though, just being thrown in the middle of that. Like, I'm just imagining this neighbor Michael just sitting at home and getting this furious knocking on the front door and just having his whole day thrown upside down. Um,
I would be upset about it at first, but once I like got the full context and
yeah,
I really got to chew on and digest what happened and how it doesn't really affect me and how the truth is known anyway,
yeah.
because now like the stepmom's going to leave Michael alone anyway because like it's not
Like,
real. But
I'm trying to put myself in Michael's shoes. Like, I'm just imagining, like, imagine me sitting here doing this podcast with you right now, and all of a sudden I get a knock on the door, and it's one of my neighbors asking, "Did you fuck my husband?" I don't think so.
if,
I mean,
again,
I mean, I get pretty high sometimes, so anything can happen, I guess. But
if it was me and I was Michael, by the second or third day, especially later in the week or the following week, I'd be like, okay, that was pretty damn funny. Like I
yeah,
would just
yeah.
roll with it after that. I'd be like, all right, that was
Which
funny as shit.
I gotta give you bonus. I gotta give the daughter bonus points for like writing. You didn't see your dad having an affair with like her cousin or her sister or whatever. You didn't see him having an affair with like somebody from work. No, it was he was having a gay affair behind your back with the neighbor.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
something about that just makes it extra spicy.
Um, I just love, I just love the, I just love the image of like her stepdad being the opposite of her stepmom, just being like a cool laid back guy. She goes over to her mom's house and tells her mom's side what happened, and her
Hmm.
stepdad's just like, "Hey, that's funny as shit." Um, but yeah, no, she is not. If if we can believe her,
Yeah.
if we can take what she's saying, you know,
Well,
as what it is.
let's even remove the stuff that like we'll try to give the mom the best case possible. Let's say the you know the part about the mom being bigoted and saying like mean things about people and being immature. Let's assume all of that is was taken out of context or exaggerated. The fact is, one, the daughter did talk to the mom saying like, "Hey, please don't read my diary," before she finally was like did what she did. And two, even if that's not true, even if she didn't talk to the mom, it's still also like you read something in a diary and immediately just went off the handle.
Yeah, yeah, she's still an idiot. Um, and and it's like, oh well, she's just trying to take an interest in your life or whatever. It's like, well, then sit down and actually have a dialogue with her. Like
Yeah.
you're just being nosy and want to gossip, or you want to like throw shit back at her. Like you don't want to like have a meaningful discussion or whatever. You're just in it for the clout, as the kids say. But
I'm reading the comments and yeah, somebody else also said I feel a little bad for the neighbor, and the poster said I do feel a little bad for Michael, but then again he said some rude and weird things to me and gives me some not so good vibes, so I don't feel as bad. So there we go.
there you go. So for the sake of the post, I'm just going to assume that this is written by one of those kids out there that is honest and just needs a place to be able to present their case truthfully.
Yeah.
So I'm still on their side. To hell with the stepmom. And again, the dad's a coward. Like
Yeah.
the dad should be like, hey, listen, just leave my kid's journal alone. Like she's not saying she wants to do any harmful things to other kids or whatever. Like just mind your own goddamn business. So
Yeah.
I leave it at that.
All right. Well, unless you got anything else to add, we can go ahead and end the episode here.
No, I'm good. 90 minutes is good.
Alrighty. Well, then, on that note, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode and listening to this episode. Be sure to follow us on all the social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that, at Fat Minute Radio. And you can find this show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. New episodes every other Monday. On that note, I'm Don John for my host, co-host BVJ. Thank you. Fuck you. Good night.